Welcome back to Sugarbee, where we dive deep into the shows and films we love most. Today, we're talking about Downton Abbey 3. She was never supposed to inherit the estate. The grand finale is nearly here, and the new trailer hints at shocking revelations, long-buried family drama, and one scandal that could change Downton forever. What if I told you that the woman now in charge of the Abbey was never actually supposed to inherit it? That's right, this film is set to explore one of the most controversial turns in the Crawley family's history. And it may rewrite everything we thought we knew about Downton's legacy. So grab a cup of tea, because this story is going to be as dramatic as the Abbey itself. When most people think of Downton Abbey, they picture the sweeping camera shots of Highclere Castle, the glimmer of chandeliers at lavish dinners, and the meticulous costumes that transport us straight back to the early 20th century. But beneath all the glamour and elegance lies the true heart of the story: inheritance, tradition, and the unshakable weight of family legacy. Every major plotline, from the very first episode to the upcoming Downton Abbey 3, has been tied to the question of who will carry on the estate and how that responsibility will shape them. From the beginning, the Crawleys' lives have been bound by the rules of primogeniture, the practice where titles and estates are passed down to the nearest male heir, regardless of whether a more capable or closer female relative exists. This law set the stage for all the drama that followed. Robert Crawley, the 7th Earl of Grantham, was bound by duty to ensure the estate stayed intact for the next generation. Yet because he had no sons, Downton was destined to pass to a distant cousin rather than to his own daughters. That initial conflict between tradition and fairness, between law and love, ignited the emotional heartbeat of the series. The weight of inheritance is not just about land or titles. It's about preserving a way of life. For the Crawleys, Downton is more than a house. It is a symbol of their family's history, reputation, and social standing. Every character, upstairs and downstairs alike, feels the ripple effects of decisions tied to inheritance. Whether it was Mary fighting for her future, Edith struggling to find her place, or even the servants wondering how changes in leadership might alter their lives. The Abbey itself has always been the central character, living, breathing entity that everyone is trying to protect. And this is where Downton Abbey 3 becomes especially fascinating. The grand finale promises to bring us back to that very same question: who deserves to inherit? Only this time, there's a twist. The person who currently holds the future of Downton in her hands was never meant to inherit it at all. This fact reshapes everything. It forces us to reconsider the Crawleys' journey, the sacrifices made, and the battles fought to keep the Abbey alive. Think about it. The very foundation of the show was built on the idea that Mary, the eldest daughter, could not inherit because she was a woman. Entire seasons revolved around marriages of convenience, desperate legal maneuvers, and even tragedy, all because the system refused to acknowledge her right. And yet, here we are. Marie is the one holding Downton together. She has stepped into a role that society never intended for her. That irony is not only powerful, it's poetic. So as we step into this final chapter, the legacy of Downton Abbey feels more important than ever. It's not just about the past anymore, it's about rewriting the future. The story that began with one woman being denied inheritance may now end with her proving she was always the rightful guardian of the estate. And that, in itself, is the ultimate Downton Abbey twist. From the very first episode, Lady Mary Crawley commanded attention. She wasn't just the eldest daughter of the Earl of Grantham, she was the figure who set the tone for the entire series. With her razor-sharp wit, icy stares, and perfectly timed one-liners, Mary quickly became one of the most complex characters in Downton Abbey. She was elegant, she was bold, and she wasn't afraid to step into scandal if it meant protecting the family name. But what makes Mary's rise to power so fascinating is that it was never supposed to happen. Mary's position as the unofficial head of the estate is the result of both tragedy and her own sheer determination. In the world she was born into, the deck was stacked against her from the very beginning. English law, with its rigid rules of male primogeniture, dictated that women could not inherit titles or large family estates. Instead, property passed automatically to the nearest male relative, no matter how distant. This meant that, despite being Robert Crawley's firstborn, Mary was legally excluded from ever becoming heir to Downton Abbey. She could wear the finest gowns, sit at the grandest dinners, and play hostess to royalty, but she could never truly claim the one thing she cared about most: Downton itself. That's why the arrival of Matthew Crawley at the start of the series was such a dramatic turning point. Matthew, a distant cousin and middle-class lawyer, was suddenly thrust into the Crawleys' world as the new heir to Downton. His presence was both a blessing and a curse. For Robert and Cora, Matthew's inheritance secured the estate's future, but for Mary, it was a bitter reminder of everything she was denied simply because of her gender. Her initial coldness toward Matthew wasn't just arrogance, it was resentment. In her eyes, this outsider was being handed a legacy she had spent her whole life preparing for, only to be told it could never be hers. Yet, Mary is nothing if not resilient. Over time, her relationship with Matthew softened, and in one of the most beloved arcs of the series, resentment gave way to love. Their eventual marriage brought Mary closer to the estate than she ever could have imagined. As Matthew modernized Downton with his forward-thinking ideas, Mary stood by his side, balancing tradition with progress. For a brief moment, it seemed like the perfect solution. Matthew would inherit. Mary would share in his authority, and together they would secure Downton's future. But fate had other plans. Matthew's sudden death in a car accident shattered that dream and left Mary standing on uncertain ground. Widowed, grieving, and with no clear heir in place, Mary found herself thrust into a leadership role she was never intended to hold. The irony was striking. After years of being sidelined by the system, Mary was now the only one capable of saving Downton. Her rise to power wasn't smooth. She faced skepticism from men who doubted her abilities, whispers from society about her independence, and the ever-present pressure of maintaining the Crawley legacy. But Mary proved herself time and again. Whether it was negotiating with land agents, making bold financial decisions, or keeping the estate afloat during turbulent times, she showed that her intellect and determination outweighed the laws that once barred her. Mary Crawley's journey is more than just a character arc, it's a story of defiance. She was never meant to inherit Downton Abbey, but through tragedy, resilience, and sheer willpower, she became its beating heart. And as Downton Abbey 3 approaches, the question lingers. Can Mary continue to hold the estate together in a world that still doubts her right to lead? So how did Lady Mary Crawley end up in charge of Downton Abbey if she was never supposed to inherit it? The answer is both heartbreaking and transformative. The true turning point came with one of the most shocking moments in the series' history: the death of Matthew Crawley. Matthew was never meant to be part of the Crawley family. At the start of the story, he was an outsider, a middle-class lawyer with no aristocratic background, suddenly thrust into the role of heir because of outdated inheritance laws. Yet against all odds, he became essential not only to the survival of Downton but also to Mary herself. Their love story, though filled with rocky starts, misunderstandings, and moments of stubborn pride, became the emotional centerpiece of the show. When they finally married, it felt like the perfect balance of tradition and progress. Mary and Matthew weren't just husband and wife, they were partners in securing Downton's future. But in a cruel twist of fate, that dream was shattered. At the end of season 3, after the birth of his and Mary's son, Matthew was killed in a sudden car crash. The image of Mary holding her newborn while Matthew's lifeless body lay on the road remains one of the most devastating moments in Downton Abbey. It wasn't just the loss of a beloved character, it was the collapse of everything the Crawleys had been working toward. Matthew's death left the family in turmoil. Without him, the estate lost not only its heir, but also the progressive vision that had begun to pull Downton into the modern world. For Mary, the loss was doubly cruel. She had finally found a partner who treated her as an equal, who saw her intelligence and strength when society only saw her gender. And in an instant, it was gone. She was left a widow, a new mother, and a woman staring down a future she had never been prepared to face. Yet it was precisely in this moment of devastation that Mary's transformation began. With no clear male heir to step in and shoulder the responsibility, she became the de facto leader of Downton. This was not a role she had been groomed for. Society had never expected her to run an estate of such magnitude, and the whispers began immediately. Could a woman, and a grieving one at that, possibly manage such a vast inheritance? Mary's grief was raw, and for a time, it nearly consumed her. But even in her darkest moments, she carried a quiet strength. She stepped into Matthew's shoes, not out of ambition but out of necessity for her son, for her family, and for Downton itself. This was the turning point that forced her into the role she had been denied for so long. She began making decisions, handling business affairs, and asserting her authority in ways that shocked the men around her. The tragedy of Matthew's death could have broken Mary completely. Instead, it reshaped her into the leader Downton needed. What was once seen as her greatest disadvantage, being a woman in a man's world, became her defining strength. She inherited not by law, but by resilience. And that single twist of fate forever changed the legacy of Downton Abbey. Lady Mary Crawley has never been one to fit neatly into society's expectations. From the earliest days of Downton Abbey, she has balanced elegance and aristocratic duty, with a razor-sharp wit and a defiance that often left those around her both impressed and unsettled. But while she has always been admired for her poise, many questioned whether she could truly handle the enormous responsibility of running Downton. Managing servants, tenants, and the endless financial burdens of an aristocratic estate was traditionally a man's role. A lady might host dinners or choose flowers for a ball, but the ledgers and land disputes, those belonged to men. And yet, here was Mary Crawley, widowed, young, and determined, taking on exactly that. While the whispers never stopped, she silenced them not through words, but through action. She learned the business of the estate, argued fiercely with her father when necessary, and became the strategic mind that kept Downton afloat in the uncertain years after World War I. Even so, some critics continued to dismiss her position as temporary, an accident of history rather than a rightful inheritance. After all, Mary only stepped into power because Matthew had died. Had things gone as originally planned, she might have remained in the shadows of a male heir. Now, as Downton Abbey 3 unfolds, that skepticism about her place resurfaces with new urgency. The trailer reveals a shocking twist: Mary is divorcing Henry Talbot. In 1930s England, divorce was more than a personal decision. It was a public scandal. For an aristocratic woman, it could mean social disgrace, political vulnerability, and a fresh wave of criticism from those who already believed she was unfit to lead. Divorce carried a stigma that could tarnish not just Mary's reputation, but the very dignity of Downton itself. This new chapter in Mary's life forces us to revisit the question at the core of her story. Was she ever truly meant to inherit Downton? For some, her leadership has always seemed like a historical accident, born out of tragedy, not tradition. Matthew's death thrust her into power, and in their eyes, she is merely holding a place until another suitable man emerges. But for others, Mary's journey has always been one of destiny. Who else, after all, has shown such resilience, intelligence, and vision? The tension between tradition and progress has been the heartbeat of Downton Abbey since the very beginning. Can a woman run an estate that was built on centuries of patriarchal rules? Can she defy not only the legal structures that excluded her but also the social expectations that seek to control her every move? In many ways, Mary embodies the struggles of her era, time when women were slowly stepping into roles of influence, not because society welcomed them, but because they refused to remain silent. And now, in this final installment, the stakes have never been higher. Mary's authority will be tested like never before, her personal life laid bare before the eyes of a judgmental society. Will she prove once again that she is more than capable of defying expectations? Or will the weight of scandal and tradition finally bring her down? One thing is certain: Mary Crawley's battle is no longer just about Downton Abbey, it's about rewriting history itself. Every discussion of inheritance at Downton Abbey ultimately circles back to one formidable presence. Violet Crawley, the Dowager Countess of Grantham, played with legendary brilliance by Maggie Smith. Violet was more than a matriarch, she was the beating heart of the Crawley dynasty. With her razor-sharp wit, her unapologetic traditionalism, and her unmatched ability to manipulate situations in her family's favor, Violet quietly became the architect of much of Downton's fate. Even now, after her passing in Downton Abbey, a new era, her influence is inescapable. Violet embodied the paradox of aristocracy, fiercely protective of tradition, yet pragmatic enough to bend the rules when survival demanded it. For years, she clashed with Robert, Cora, and even Mary herself over what Downton should become. And yet, in the end, she always seemed to know exactly which compromises would preserve the estate's legacy for another generation. She had no illusions about the inevitability of change. She simply insisted on controlling the terms. This makes Violet's shadow especially significant in Downton Abbey 3. Though she is no longer alive, her presence will loom over every decision Mary makes. After all, it was Violet who often hinted at Mary's deeper potential. Her sharp advice may have sounded like scolding, but underneath the cutting remarks was a recognition of Mary's strength. Violet, unlike many others, seemed to understand that Mary was not just a lady meant to smile at parties and charm suitors. She was, in her own way, a warrior. Still, the lingering question is this: Did Violet actually want Mary to take the reins? Or would she have preferred a different outcome altogether? Violet was, after all, a woman of her time. She defended male primogeniture with biting sarcasm in the show's early years. She saw the system as flawed, yes, but immutable. To her, tradition was not something one simply discarded, so while she may have respected Mary's resolve, Violet might also have bristled at the idea of her granddaughter fully inheriting power that was never meant for her. This tension makes Violet's legacy a double-edged sword. On the one hand, her approval expressed in subtle looks and backhanded compliments gave Mary confidence at critical moments. On the other, Violet's voice of tradition still echoes through Downton's halls, reminding everyone of how things were supposed to be. For Mary, stepping into full authority means not only proving herself to society, but also living up to or defying the unspoken expectations of the grandmother who shaped her world in Downton Abbey 3. This ghostly influence could become more central than ever. Mary's divorce, her leadership, and her role as the de facto head of Downton will all be judged in light of what Violet might have thought. Would Violet see Mary as fulfilling the Crawley legacy or betraying it? One thing is certain. Even from beyond the grave, Violet Crawley continues to command the stage. Her wit may be silenced, but her shadow looms large over every Crawley decision. And as the final chapter of Downton unfolds, it may be Violet's legacy, more than anything else, that determines whether Mary's leadership is remembered as destiny. Defiance. She was never supposed to inherit the estate. That phrase captures not only the central tension of Downton Abbey 3 but the very essence of Lady Mary Crawley's journey. For decades, Downton Abbey was ruled by the ironclad law of male primogeniture. The eldest daughter, no matter how capable, could never inherit the title or the estate outright. It was designed to ensure that estates passed down through the male line, keeping wealth and power concentrated in men's hands. Mary's rise to power was never part of the plan. It was a story born out of tragedy, necessity, and sheer determination. And yet, here we are, as Downton Abbey 3 approaches. The Crawleys are forced to face an uncomfortable truth. The future of their family legacy rests in the hands of someone who was never meant to lead it. Mary's authority has always carried the weight of doubt. Was she the rightful leader of Downton, or simply a placeholder until a more suitable male heir emerged? That question, whispered in drawing rooms and echoed by traditionalists, has followed her for years. Now, in the 1930s, the stakes are higher than ever. The aristocracy is crumbling under the pressures of modernity. Economic challenges, shifting social values, and political upheavals mean that the old rules are no longer sufficient to guarantee survival. Downton Abbey, like many estates of its kind, sits at a crossroads. The world is changing and so must the Crawleys. But can Mary, with her unconventional path and her personal struggles, truly guide the estate into the future? The trailer hints at both triumph and danger. Mary's divorce from Henry Talbot underscores just how unconventional her life has become. Divorce in this era wasn't just frowned upon, it was scandalous, a stain that could follow her and tarnish the family name. For critics of her leadership, this could be the excuse they've been waiting for, proof, in their eyes, that she lacks the stability and respectability to lead. Yet for others, her independence is a symbol of strength. By defying societal expectations, Mary may actually embody the resilience needed to keep Downton alive in a changing world. This conflict, between tradition and progress, between who Mary was supposed to be and who she has become, drives the final chapter. Will she silence the doubters once and for all, proving that her leadership is not an accident of history but an evolution of it? Or will her untraditional choices, her independence, her willingness to scandalize, her refusal to bend mark the end of Downton as the world has known it? And that's where we leave it, friends. Downton Abbey 3 isn't just another chapter, it's the final bow for a story that's carried us through love, loss, tradition, and change. From Mary's fight to prove herself, to Violet's shadow that still lingers over every decision. This finale ties everything back to where it all began: inheritance, legacy, and the question of who truly belongs at Downton. As we prepare to step back into those grand halls one last time, there's both excitement and bittersweet nostalgia. We've laughed with these characters, cried with them, and now we'll say goodbye to them. Whether Downton survives through Mary's leadership or faces its final sunset, one thing is certain: the Crawleys' story has left an unforgettable mark on all of us. So tell me, do you think Mary has what it takes to secure the future of Downton once and for all? Or will history close the doors on the Abbey for good? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading what you all think. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss any of our deep dives into the biggest shows and finales. This has been Sugarbee, and I'll see you in the next one.